Hello plant lovers, Matthew in Melbourne welcoming you back to my channel. Thank you for finding me. If you're new here, I grow cold, cool, intermediate orchids here in Melbourne without any greenhouses or humidifiers or heat mats, etc. They're either growing inside or outside, or they're out of the pool. And further to that, obviously, my quest has always been to find great, easy, wonderful growing orchids that I can grow in my environment that can hopefully sometimes stay outside all year, under cover, protected from the elements, but nonetheless outside, or half-half inside-outside, or inside but with no, particularly special care, particularly when it comes to humidity and heat, because it gets a little chilly in winter here in Melbourne. Anyway, let us talk about Masdevallia, because they fit that description perfectly. And this beauty, look at this, 4 flowers. I am very happy is in bloom right now, so it seems to be a perfect time to talk Masdevallia. First thing then, let me just talk about my environment. So here in Melbourne, we have cold, wet winters that don't freeze. The temperatures can get down to 1 or 2 degrees Celsius at winter, at night, which is, 32 to 36 Fahrenheit, chilly, but doesn't freeze. And we don't get frosts in the city generally. I've never experienced one. I'm sure they might happen, but not yet. And the summers can be hot and dry, but they can also be damp, cold and chilly. So the great thing about Melbourne summers is that if we do have a spell of hot weather, it's usually 1 or 2 days max, and then it cools down. So Masdevallia, I'm here to tell you, is a cold, cool growing orchid that doesn't like the heat. So let's talk about this one. Isn't it stunning? So firstly, it is Masdevallia, and it's Coccinea alba, which is the species orchid, and this is a variety that is a snow tree crossed with Blanca. Now, plant lovers, you might well remember, assuming you've watched other of my videos, that I repotted a Masdevallia, and it was a white one that I had ordered online. I have the most terrible feeling that they're essentially the same. Anyway, we'll find out. The one I repotted as yet hasn't quite burst into bud, and it might not because I received it quite late in the season, i.e. late winter, and these are obviously early spring flowers, so I may have missed the boat there. Anyway, next year perhaps we'll see that it's identical to this one and I'll have to move on. But anyway, Masdevallia. So if you are in a cold, cool climate, Masdevallia are perfect. They do not like the heat and they don't like the tropics. The reason being their native range is high in the mountains of Colombia and Peru, which sounds so exotic, but up to 3,000 meters, which means it would get very chilly at night, particularly in winter. So they might even be able to go colder than I'm growing them here, but I don't know, I can't speak to that. My temperatures don't get below freezing, so there you are. So as you can see, the flowers are all out. Masdevallia generally are spring flowers. I'm sure there are some that aren't, but mine always tend to flower in spring, which means the flowers usually start emerging mid-late winter, and they're pretty fast to mature, I have to say. The other great thing about this orchid is that, and I can't remember, I think this was the first one to open, and that was about 3 weeks ago, if not 4 weeks ago, followed by the others sequentially. But I'm quite surprised that this has lasted so long. I'm pleasantly surprised because I did fear and feel that Masdevallias might not last that long, but so far so good. This one has definitely been open for 3 weeks and it looks perfectly fine. It's not on the turn. It will go for at least another couple of weeks, I imagine, which is 4 to 6 weeks. So I'm very happy with the longevity of these flowers. Okie doke, care. I have done a Masdevallia video before, but it is always useful to refresh. Now, so cold, cool growers, which means they don't like extremes. However, as I said, mine is outdoors all year. Now it's protected and it doesn't get rained on, but it can get quite hot in summer. But as I mentioned, those hot conditions do tend to turn around quite quickly in Melbourne, and the nights tend to not be that hot. So they seem to thrive. Masdevallia like a shady spot, and you will read everywhere, I think, that it says, do not let the light of day touch the delicate leaves of your Masdevallia. But plant lovers, I'm here to tell you that mine do get quite a bit of gentle morning sun in winter. That might seem heretical, but I have found that all my Masdevallia do really well with that. So the winter sun is very gentle, it's not powerful, and it's early in the morning, and it is dappled, but it's on them nonetheless. Now, this one I got as a division, and this leaf you can see here is already damaged, and I would imagine that is perhaps sun damage from before my time. The new foliage is luscious and green and gorgeous. So they are sensitive to sunlight. You don't want to overdo it, but I think a little gentle winter morning sun is great, and I feel that it really stimulates the flower production. In summer, you do want to be much more careful and make sure they're not getting direct sun. But I must say though, again, in summer, because of the direction of the sun here, they do get very, very early a little bit of direct sun, but then dappled shade the rest of the day. The other basic thing to understand is Masdevallia, as you can see, do not have pseudobulbs, which means they are one of those orchids that do not want to dry out. That doesn't mean though, you've got to overwater them. So with such things, it's with a bit of a delicate balance, because overwatering is the easiest way to kill an orchid. But particularly orchids like this that don't like to dry out, it can be quite tricky if you're unsure. For me, it is quite simply that if you put your finger into the medium, if you go down about a knuckles width, you don't want it to be dry. Which means in summer, I can give these a bit of water every day, and in winter, maybe once every 5 days. It really depends on what the ambient temperature's been like and if it's been warm. Understanding, of course, I'm a terracotta pot kind of guy, and they evaporate quickly, which is good in many respects, but in summer, it means that the medium can dry out really quickly. So keep your eye on them in summer if you've got them in terracotta pots. Masdevallia coccinea is a terrestrial in Colombia and Peru, which means the medium I use is a little denser than your average orchid mix. Now, talking of which, what I actually do with my Masdevallias, and in fact with any terrestrial orchid, is I use out of the bag orchid mix from a hardware store. Nothing special. And the reason is it does have bark pieces in it, but it also has much more, I want to say soil, but it's not, it's sort of more grit. So it's a little bit denser. It gives a hint of the terrestrial type of potting mix, I feel. And they all seem to thrive really well. It's still free draining because you don't want the roots to be soggy, but you don't want it to dry out. If you're concerned, you can always put a bit of sphagnum moss in there as well, and perlite. But generally, it's a fairly generic orchid mix. And in my mix, I always put my secret ingredients, which are not that secret, which are a couple of grains of slow-release fertilizer and mycorrhizal fungi, which promotes healthy root growth and acts as the go-between between the nutrients in the soil and the plant's roots. It makes them available. So generally, your plants will have much healthier roots and thrive because healthy roots are a healthy plant. And fertilizer-wise, so after you put a bit of slow-release fertilizer in the potting mix, every spring I do a topical application of a few grains again. And then during the warmer season, spring, summer, I will maybe every 2 or 3 waterings give it a diluted liquid feed, whatever that might be. So sometimes it's a seaweed-based solution, which I dilute to about 1/8 of the recommended dose on the packet. Sometimes it's a liquid orchid-specific food. Again, I dilute that more. Or it might be a bloom-specific soluble fertilizer if I can see that the orchids are in spike. And again, I dilute that more. I feel it's a bad habit to get into overfeeding plants because you can create kind of mad growth and it doesn't actually help that much. In fact, it can be a hindrance. So I always dial down the food. So the only other strange thing about this orchid, well, there's 2 strange things. Firstly is this weird strappy thing that's growing in it. I have no idea what it is. It is not an orchid. It hasn't really done much. It certainly hasn't flowered. It could be a bulby thing of some sort. It was clearly in the plant when I potted it up and didn't notice it. And I can't just pull it out because it's going to pull out the whole plant. So it'll have to wait till I repot this again, which will be in a couple of years. Anyway, doesn't seem to be hurting it. But if you're wondering what these strappy leaves are, I have no idea. Second strange thing was that the first few leaves, once I repotted it, and these were leaves that were already kind of there, I guess, embryonically, grew in this sort of twisted and slightly deformed manner. So they didn't grow straight up as the other leaves did and have done since. And it was only about 3 or 4 in that first instance. Since then, all the new leaves have been really healthy and totally normal in their growth pattern. So that's curious. I have no idea why that happened, but anyway, maybe it was a bit of trauma. So then I guess the other thing about Masdevallia is where the flowers come from. So it's a single flower, as you can see, and it comes from the base of an established leaf. So if you imagine you've got the leaf stalk, then the flower kind of comes out just at the bottom. And it's a little nub that comes out and then grows away from the leaf. So if you're looking in mid to late winter, the place to look is mature leaves, and you'll just see a little bump starts to appear at the bottom of it. Now a new leaf grows in a different position. Because this is an orchid with a rhizome, the new leaves tend to come up in that manner. One new growth follows another, not necessarily in a linear projection. They can come all over the place, but the flowers don't. The flowers come just from the base of an established leaf. So you will be able to tell the difference between a new growth and a flower, because they can actually occur at the same time. So there we are. The only other thing to report is absolutely no fragrance. So if fragrant orchids are your thing, Masdevallia are not your thing. But aren't they just wonderful? And look at the size of the flower. It's really quite large. I love the architectural nature of it and the really sort of bright white, which I don't really have in many orchids, which is why I bought this one and why I bought the other one, which I feel is going to be absolutely the same. Anyway, if you're in Melbourne, plant lovers, I might have to pass on one of these because there's no point having two that are the same. But anyway, they're very, very lovely flowers. And because Masdevallia just seems so suited to Melbourne's climate, I have gone a bit crazy. I think I've got about 5, maybe 6, but who's counting? A couple of them are in bud as well, so I'll certainly show you those when they open up. But this was the first cab off the rank, a very early bloomer. I have seen other really strong colour variants of this species type, so have a look if they're in your hood, because you can get some amazing colours. And there's all the amazing hybrids of Masdevallia, which are the other ones I've got, which will come to soon. And then the name, Masdevallia. So it turns out it was named after a chap called José Masdeval, who was a physician and a botanist in Spain in the 18th century. So I imagine some Spanish plant hunter in Colombia and Peru named it after someone who had a reputation for being interested in such things. And there we are, Masdevallia has stuck, because many names change and the person it's named after is forgotten, such as Colmenara, Mr. Coleman. But Masdevallia has lingered, so we will always remember José Masdeval. There we are, plant lovers. Masdevallia 101. This beauty is in bloom with 4 flowers. It makes me very, very happy. I hope wherever you are, your orchids are doing well. I look forward to seeing you next week with another adventure. In the meantime, Masdevallia, coccinea, alba and I are saying goodbye until next week.